The stars were always silent, Captain James Calloway thought. Even when Earth had finally entered the galactic stage, discovering thousands of new worlds, the stars still spoke in the cold, indifferent language of time. No matter how much humanity had advanced, how many wars had been fought and won, how many technological marvels they'd unlocked, the stars remained as silent as ever. But that silence, as humanity would soon learn, was about to be broken. It all started on the eve of humanity's greatest achievement: first contact. Calloway stood before the massive observation windows of the United Nations headquarters in New York, his eyes fixed on the alien vessel hovering just outside Earth's orbit. The Zora T ship was unlike anything humanity had ever seen. Sleek and metallic, it shimmered in the sunlight, casting eerie reflections on the clouds below. It seemed to hum with an unnatural presence, as though the ship itself was alive. Calloway's mind buzzed with a mix of awe and dread. The ship, which had appeared unannounced 2 days ago, was now a constant presence in the sky. And with it came a message. Humanity was being watched. For centuries, the Zora T had monitored Earth from the fringes of the galaxy. Their surveillance networks had scoured the planet for any sign of significant technological progress. The moment humans had reached a level of sophistication that merited their attention, the Zora T moved in. Earth's leadership had been split from the moment the news broke. While the public clamored for a peaceful resolution, many of Earth's military factions had become immediately suspicious. Some feared the worst, that the Zora T, for all their technological advancements, had arrived not as benevolent visitors, but as conquerors. Others, like Ambassador Lyra Dawson, believed that peaceful cooperation was possible. It was on this razor's edge of hope and fear that Calloway found himself. The UN had requested his presence, and though he was no diplomat, his experience in strategic decision-making was vital. His military background was crucial now. For the first time in history, humanity was about to stand face to face with an alien species, and there was no room for error. Inside the UN's conference hall, representatives from across the world were gathered. Calloway entered the room, his presence commanding, his uniform polished and neat. He exchanged a brief nod with Ambassador Dawson, who stood at the front of the room. She gave him a smile, one that didn't quite reach her eyes. He understood the sentiment. The weight of the moment was crushing. "Captain Calloway, thank you for coming," Dawson said, gesturing to the long table at the center of the room. "We've been briefed on the situation." "I'm here to offer whatever support I can," Calloway replied, settling into his seat. "But I'll be blunt, Ambassador. We're facing something we can't predict. No matter how advanced we are, the Zora T hold all the cards right now." Dawson's gaze didn't waver. "I'm aware of that. But we don't have the luxury of panicking. Our goal is to establish a peaceful dialogue, not provoke them into hostility." "We can't trust them," Calloway said, his voice low. "We don't know what they want. For all we know, they've come to invade." There was a murmur around the table. Some nodded in agreement, while others shot him disapproving glances. But Dawson raised her hand, silencing the room. "I understand your concerns, Captain. But we can't afford to assume the worst. Not yet." Before Calloway could respond, the massive screens in the room flickered to life. A calm, almost dispassionate voice filled the air. "This is Tkar, emissary of the Zora T. We come in peace." The voice was fluid, smooth, alien, but with an almost mechanical precision. "We request an audience with your leaders." The projection on the screen showed a figure, tall and humanoid, though its features were so alien they were difficult to decipher. Their skin was a smooth, almost reflective surface, and their eyes, dark, fathomless and unblinking, stared directly at the camera as though seeing right through it. The figure's voice continued, a soft hum beneath the words. "You have evolved rapidly, human species. The time has come for you to join the galactic community. We offer you the chance to participate in a federation of advanced civilizations. You will be granted our technologies, our wisdom, and a place among us." The voice paused, as if considering something. "But there is a condition. You must submit to the oversight of the Zorati. Calloway's pulse quickened. The words submit and oversight were as ominous as any weapon. You are given this opportunity not out of charity, the emissary continued, but because we have observed your species and judged you to be unworthy of independent existence. You will abide by the laws of our Federation or face the consequences of non-compliance. The transmission ended abruptly, and the room was left in stunned silence. For a moment, Calloway saw only disbelief on the faces around him, followed by a slow simmer of anger. He could see Dawson's face, still composed, though her eyes betrayed the conflict within. She had hoped for a peaceful outcome, but this was far from that. Did they just say submit? One of the military commanders, General Harris, growled. And what about this oversight? It sounds like they want us as their pets. We need to understand more before we make any decisions, Dawson said, her voice steady despite the storm brewing in her mind. We can't just reject them outright without considering the implications. I disagree, Calloway said bluntly. If they wanted to be peaceful, they wouldn't have thrown down the gauntlet like that. This is a test, Ambassador. They're measuring our resolve. And I guarantee you, the moment we show any sign of weakness, they'll move in. Dawson met his gaze. What do you suggest, Captain? Prepare for the worst, Calloway replied. We can't afford to show them we're afraid. If they won't talk peace, we need to be ready to defend Earth. He looked at the room, then back at Dawson. We can't let them think we're some backward species to be manipulated. We're humans. We fight when necessary. His words hung in the air, heavy with the promise of conflict. The debate continued, but the rift between the diplomats and military commanders only grew. Some argued for diplomacy, while others, led by Calloway, insisted on preparing for battle. Meanwhile, the Zorati remained a silent presence in orbit, their ship watching like a predator waiting for its prey to make the first move. As the meeting adjourned, Calloway stayed behind, his mind racing. He knew what had to be done. But first, he needed to gather his team, his most trusted officers, and start formulating a plan. Earth was not about to surrender without a fight. As he left the conference room, Dawson caught up with him. Captain, I know your heart is set on resistance, but please consider the alternative. We can avoid bloodshed. Calloway stopped in his tracks, meeting her gaze. We can't avoid the bloodshed forever, Ambassador. The Zorati won't stop until they've conquered us. And I'm not willing to let that happen. Dawson's eyes softened, but she said nothing. Instead, she simply nodded and walked away. The war for humanity's survival was about to begin. You said. The news spread quickly like wildfire across the globe. The Zorati had given humanity an ultimatum. A trial. A test, they called it. They would present humanity with a series of challenges, each designed to measure the value of the human race. At first, there was disbelief, followed by a nervous kind of anticipation. What did this test mean? Would humanity pass, or would the aliens use it as a pretext to destroy Earth? Captain James Calloway, once again at the center of the decision-making process, felt a growing sense of unease as he prepared for the unknown. The Zorati's ship hovered just beyond Earth's atmosphere, its ominous presence hanging over the planet like a dark cloud. The diplomatic factions were desperate for peace, hoping that these trials would reveal humanity's worth, but Calloway wasn't so sure. The Zorati were too cold, too calculating to be trusted. He had a bad feeling about what lay ahead. The first trial came without warning. Captain Calloway, the voice of Ambassador Lyra Dawson echoed through the intercom. We need you and your team to assemble immediately. The Zorati are ready to begin the first test. The challenge was simple in theory, though fraught with complications in practice. The Zorati had detected a Zorati science delegation stranded on a distant planet, somewhere on the edge of the solar system, their ship damaged in a violent storm. The trial was a rescue mission. Humanity would be required to extract the delegation and bring them to safety, navigating the harsh storm that was rapidly intensifying on the planet's surface. Sounded like a straightforward task. But Calloway knew better. If the Zora-T were testing humanity, they would be setting up more than just a simple rescue operation. Within hours, Calloway assembled a team of the best pilots, engineers, and medics he could find. The stakes were high. This was humanity's first real test in the eyes of the Zora-T. Failure wasn't an option. The team's shuttle was prepped and ready, and they would leave within minutes. His crew, including his trusted second-in-command Lieutenant Maria Sykes and Dr. Rajiv Singh, the scientist who had been studying the Zora-T's technology, were already on board, each person silently preparing themselves for the unknown. "Calloway," Sykes said as they prepared to depart, "there's something off about this mission. The storm they're sending us into is no coincidence. You think they're testing us?" "No doubt," Calloway replied grimly. "The Zora-T don't do anything without a purpose. But this is the first challenge. It'll be a show of humanity's resolve. We need to prove that we can adapt to whatever they throw at us." Dr. Singh, his face tense with worry, joined the conversation. "And if this is a trap?" "If it's a trap, then we'll deal with it. We've faced worse odds before." Calloway's voice was firm, but his mind was racing. What exactly were the Zora-T testing? Would they test human ingenuity, leadership, or something darker? As the shuttle rocketed into space, the Earth-bound observers at the United Nations held their collective breath. Everyone knew that humanity's fate rested on this trial. As the team approached the storm-ravaged planet, Calloway could see the swirling clouds from the observation window. The atmosphere was churning with violent winds, and the surface below was obscured by intense, nearly impenetrable lightning storms. The turbulence was unlike anything Calloway had ever experienced. "Brace yourselves," he ordered, his voice calm but unwavering. The shuttle dipped into the storm, the craft shaking violently as they descended toward the planet's surface. The rain lashed against the shuttle's hull, and the thunder seemed to shake the very bones of the ship. Calloway gripped the armrest of his seat as the shuttle plunged deeper into the chaos. This wasn't just a storm, it was engineered chaos, the kind of challenge the Zora-T would think would break humanity. But Calloway wouldn't let it. The shuttle's engines roared as they fought against the wind. Sykes, in the co-pilot seat, adjusted the controls with precision, navigating the shuttle through a gap in the storm. The wind howled, but Sykes' hands were steady. "We're coming up on the Zora-T ship," she said, her voice tense but controlled. Calloway peered out the window. There it was, a damaged Zora-T ship, half buried in the landscape, its once sleek form now battered and torn by the storm. A handful of Zora-T crew members were scattered around the wreckage, sheltering in place, barely able to move. The sight of them sent a pang of unease through Calloway's chest. These were the so-called superior beings, now stranded and helpless in the face of an alien environment. "We're going in," Calloway ordered. The shuttle descended rapidly, narrowly avoiding jagged rock formations that jutted out of the storm's depths. As the landing gears hit the rocky surface, the shuttle shook again, throwing everyone off balance for a brief moment. "We've landed," Sykes announced. The airlock opened with a hiss, and Calloway led the team out into the storm. The wind cut through his suit like 1,000 knives, and the rain was so thick it felt like needles striking his face. He squinted through the torrential downpour, the wreckage of the Zora-T ship looming ahead. His team moved swiftly, shields up and weapons drawn, though they all knew this wasn't a combat mission. The Zora-T crew members, weak from exposure and disoriented by the storm, watched with hollow eyes. Calloway motioned for them to fall in behind his team as they began to secure the site. "This is an interesting first challenge," Singh muttered. "It's not about strategy or skill. It's about resilience. The Zora-T are testing whether humans can endure under extreme pressure." Calloway gave a sharp nod. "If they think we'll break under pressure, they're wrong." As they began their journey back to the shuttle, the storm intensified. The winds howled, and the ground seemed to shift beneath their feet. Calloway had expected danger, but this was something else. The Zora-T had designed this environment to push them to their limits, and they weren't done yet. In the distance, he saw something flicker, An unstable energy surged from the wreckage of the Zorati ship. "Get back to the shuttle now," Calloway barked. But it was too late. The energy surge erupted in a violent burst of light. The shock wave knocked Calloway and his team to the ground, the world spinning around them. Through the chaos, he saw Sykes and Singh struggling to regain their footing. The Zorati, who had been following them, scattered in panic, their advanced technology failing them under the pressure of the storm. "Captain!" Sykes yelled over the wind. "We have to move now." Calloway pushed himself up, grabbing the nearest Zorati crew member and dragging them toward the shuttle. The storm was closing in on them, and the ship was their only hope. With the last of their strength, the humans and Zorati made it to the shuttle just in time. As the hatch slammed shut behind them, Calloway felt a rush of relief, but his heart was still pounding. They had succeeded, but only just. The Zorati delegation had been rescued, but at great cost. As the shuttle lifted off, escaping the storm's grasp, Calloway looked back at the planet below. The Zorati's challenge had been more than just a test of skill. It had been a test of human endurance, a reminder that no matter how extreme the circumstances, humans would always find a way to survive. But the Zorati hadn't expected the next trial. No one could have. Back in the safety of Earth's orbit, Calloway prepared for the next challenge. The Zorati might have underestimated humanity's resilience, but they would soon learn that humans were capable of far more than they ever imagined. "Prepare yourselves," Calloway said, his voice steady. "This is only the beginning." 2 of 2. Captain James Calloway stood at the observation window of the military command center, staring out into the vastness of space. The Zorati ship still hovered ominously above Earth, its presence a constant reminder of the test humanity was enduring. The first trial was behind them, but the Zorati had made it clear. This was only the beginning. If humanity thought that surviving the storm had proven their worth, they were sorely mistaken. The Zorati had always been playing a deeper game, something more intricate than simple survival. Calloway knew that the trials would escalate, but even he hadn't anticipated what would come next. The message from the Zorati was brief but chilling. "Your next trial will test your leadership and unity. Only together can you hope to succeed." Unity. Leadership. Calloway's mind raced as the implications of the Zorati's words settled in. What were they really testing? Was it a test of human cooperation? Of how well Earth's fractured nations could pull together in the face of a common challenge? Or was it something more insidious? A trial to see how quickly humans would fracture under pressure. The door to the command center opened, and Ambassador Lyra Dawson entered, her expression more guarded than usual. Calloway turned from the window to face her. "We need to talk," Dawson said, her voice tight. "The Zorati are already preparing the next challenge. It's going to push us further than the first one." "We're ready," Calloway replied, though even as he said the words, a knot of doubt tightened in his chest. The first trial had been dangerous enough, but it had been a test of human grit and resilience. They had passed. The second would undoubtedly be different. It would demand more than just survival. It would demand something far harder. "They've set the stage," Dawson said, walking over to the map table. "It's a simulation of an interplanetary crisis. A massive asteroid is heading toward Earth. We need to divert it. But the twist is that the asteroid's trajectory is so precise that we can't simply destroy it or deflect it with conventional weapons. There are only a few hours to act, and we'll need to come up with a solution together. The challenge isn't just technical, it's about how we work as a unified species." Calloway's eyes narrowed. "So, this is the Zorati's version of a coordinated response. They're testing us as a team, not just individuals." Dawson nodded. "Exactly. We've been given the tools, our best scientists and engineers, plus the military assets needed to stop the asteroid, but they're watching closely. They want to see if humanity can put aside its differences and pull together. If we fail, it could be a disaster." "We're not going to fail," Calloway said firmly. "But this is going to be the real test of humanity. We've never faced a challenge this monumental, not in such a short time." The weight of the situation pressed down on him. He knew the clock was ticking. The asteroid was on a collision course with Earth, and the world had to act fast. The operations center was a hive of activity. Scientists, engineers, and military personnel from across the globe worked in frenzied collaboration. Each group focused on different aspects of the asteroid crisis. Calloway and Dawson had called a special meeting to devise the plan, and now they had only hours left to save the planet. "We've got a serious problem," Dr. Rajiv Singh, the lead scientist, said, his voice tight with concern. "The asteroid is too large and too dense. Any conventional missile launch could trigger a catastrophic chain reaction. If we break it apart, we risk an impact event worse than the original collision. But if we try to deflect it with a laser or gravitational tractor beam, we might miss our window of opportunity." "Don't tell me there's no way to stop it," Calloway growled, his patience beginning to fray. The weight of the entire world rested on their shoulders. "There's a way," Dr. Singh said, his voice more hopeful. "It's unconventional, but we could theoretically reroute the asteroid using a combination of gravitational slingshot technology and the ship's engines, with just enough push to nudge it off course." Calloway's mind raced. This was the kind of ingenuity humans had built their entire existence on, finding creative, sometimes unconventional solutions when it seemed like all was lost. But would they have enough time to implement it? The asteroid was closing in fast. "We're going to need a team on the ground," Sykes, Calloway's second-in-command, added. "And the political fractures we've been trying to hold together. They're going to make this difficult." It was true. Despite the global efforts at unity, Earth's political divisions were still a hindrance. The militaries of different nations were reluctant to share resources and collaborate, each nation jealously guarding its technological secrets and military advantages. To make matters worse, there was no single leader to unify the planet in a time of crisis. Humanity was a collection of warring ideologies and interests. Calloway took a deep breath. "This is the part where humanity either proves itself or we fail. We need to convince every government, every faction, that there's no us and them right now. There's only we," Dawson added. "And if we fail, the Zorati will have their answer. The trial won't just be a failure for humanity. It'll be a global embarrassment. There's too much at stake." Calloway walked to the center of the operations room, addressing the gathered team. "Listen up. We have a solution. It's not perfect, but it's our best shot. We need to work together. No egos. No national pride. This is Earth versus a threat that could destroy everything. If we pull this off, we show the Zorati we're more than just survivors. We're innovators. And we do it as one." The room fell silent for a moment, before Dr. Singh stepped forward, nodding. "We'll need to communicate with every country's space agency and military command to synchronize our efforts." "That's the easy part," Sykes said with a grin. "The real challenge is getting them to agree on anything." "We'll make them," Calloway said, his voice unyielding. "If it comes down to it, we'll force them. We can't afford to fail." The team set to work, each person now fully aware of the gravity of the situation. Hours flew by as they coordinated with space agencies, military commanders, and governments around the world. There were tense moments, with countries bickering over who would lead the operation, who would provide the resources. But Calloway, relentless as always, kept the pressure on. It wasn't just about saving Earth. It was about proving humanity's worth, showing the Zorati that they could rise above their divisions when faced with the ultimate challenge. With only minutes to spare, they were ready. The asteroid was now within range, and the slingshot maneuver was set into motion. The military launched a fleet of satellites, each one lined up perfectly to create a gravitational pull on the asteroid. A team of astronauts, led by Lieutenant Sykes, would rendezvous with the asteroid to deploy the engine thrusters, providing the final nudge. The tension was unbearable as the countdown began. "Here we go," Calloway muttered under his breath, watching the screens as the fleet of satellites powered up. The maneuver went off without a hitch, but there was a critical moment when it seemed as though they might have missed their window. The asteroid was too close. The world held its breath. Then the asteroid shifted. The thrusters fired, the satellites aligned, and with a sudden, unmistakable change in trajectory, the asteroid veered off course. The danger was averted. "Status report," Calloway barked. "We did it, Captain," Dr. Singh replied, his voice breaking with relief. "The asteroid has been diverted. We've averted a global catastrophe." Calloway stood in stunned silence for a moment before turning to the rest of the team. They had done it. Humanity had done it. Against all odds, they had pulled together, despite their divisions, despite the massive challenge, to save their world. Dawson stepped up to him, a rare smile crossing her face. "You were right, Captain. We proved ourselves. And we've sent a message to the Zorati." Calloway nodded. "Yes, we have. And it's a message they won't forget. Humans may be divided, but when the chips are down, we fight together. And no one can take that away from us." The victory was not just technical. It was emotional, psychological. Humanity had passed the Zorati's second test, and Calloway knew that the stakes would only rise from here. But if the Zorati thought humanity would crumble under pressure, they were about to learn the true depth of what it meant to be human. The game had changed. Humanity had passed the first two trials, but the Zorati had only just begun. Captain James Calloway's hands gripped the edge of the command center's table as he listened to the latest message from the alien race. The screen before him flickered, and the calm, emotionless voice of the Zorati leader, Verith, filled the room. "You have proven your worth in the previous trials. But now you will face the ultimate test. The final trial will be a trial of the mind, spirit, and soul. You must confront your darkest fears. We will provide no assistance. If you survive this trial, humanity will be deemed worthy." A chill ran down Calloway's spine. The Zorati had been difficult to predict from the very beginning, but this was something different. A trial of the mind, spirit, and soul. What did that even mean? "Captain Calloway," Ambassador Lyra Dawson spoke up from across the room, her voice laced with concern. "This isn't a challenge we can prepare for. We don't know what the Zorati mean by this. Their definition of fear could be very different from ours." Calloway nodded grimly. "We can't afford to second-guess ourselves now. Whatever it is, we'll face it head-on. We've made it this far." Dawson took a deep breath. "I'll arrange a global summit. We need all nations on the same page, especially now." The world was teetering on the edge. The previous trials had brought humanity together, but with each trial, the stakes were rising. Calloway had no illusions about the Zorati's true intentions. This final test wasn't just about saving humanity. It was about proving that humanity could rise above anything, even its own limitations. But Calloway wasn't sure if even humans were capable of confronting such an abstract challenge. How could you fight an enemy that didn't exist? How could you survive something that was entirely within your own mind? He knew, though, that it wasn't just about surviving anymore. It was about proving that humanity was more than just a species of survivors. They were creators, thinkers, dreamers, capable of turning their worst nightmares into triumphs. But would that be enough? The trial began without warning. Calloway had been standing in the operations room, discussing strategies with his team, when the Zorati's voice reverberated through the ship's intercom. "The trial begins now. You have 1 hour. Go." Suddenly, the world around him seemed to warp and twist. The very air itself felt thick, oppressive. The walls of the command center flickered, the technology glitching before it melted into an eerie, distorted blur. Calloway blinked, trying to focus on something. Anything, but nothing felt real. It wasn't just his eyes. He could feel it. The weight of something in the air, a presence watching him. For the first time in a long while, the captain felt small, insignificant. Then it hit him, his worst fear. In an instant, he was no longer in the command center. The walls disappeared, and he found himself standing on an empty battlefield. His heart pounded in his chest. The landscape stretched out before him, a desolate wasteland of scorched earth and smoking ruins. This was no ordinary battlefield, though. This was a memory. His memory. The battlefield was an echo of his time during the Second Great War. He saw soldiers, young men and women, lying in the dirt, their faces frozen in expressions of terror. He saw himself in the distance, leading a squadron through a forest, desperate to secure a position when the bombardment started. The fear in their eyes was clear. He had seen it before. Calloway's throat constricted. The faces were too real, too familiar. The fear he had tried so hard to bury, the responsibility he had carried for those he lost, it all came rushing back in an overwhelming wave. "Captain Calloway," a voice whispered behind him. He spun, but there was no one there. "You are the leader. The burden is yours." It was then that the truth hit him. This wasn't just a memory. It was a test of his guilt, his doubt, his own self-worth. The Zorati were showing him his failure, the lives he couldn't save, the choices that haunted him to this day. "I couldn't save them," Calloway murmured aloud, his voice breaking. "I couldn't save them." A figure stepped forward from the shadows, wearing the uniform of a fallen soldier, the nameplate worn and faded. Calloway recognized the face instantly. Private Emily Hayes, a young soldier who had died under his command during an ambush. Her eyes were full of accusation. "Why didn't you save me, Captain?" she asked, her voice quiet but full of anger. "Why didn't you protect us?" Calloway staggered backward, his chest tightening with panic. I tried. I didn't know." The world around him shifted again, and the battlefield dissolved, replaced by a quiet, sterile environment, an operating room. He was alone. The voice returned. "This is your trial, Calloway. This is what you've been running from all along. You cannot escape your guilt." Calloway's mind raced. He knew what the Zorati were doing. They were forcing him to confront his own fears, the fear of failing those he had led, the fear of being powerless in the face of insurmountable odds. But he couldn't let it overwhelm him. He couldn't let the past control him. He needed to fight back. Meanwhile, across the globe, humanity was facing their own trials. Each person, each leader, each soldier was being forced to confront their darkest fears in ways they hadn't imagined. The Zorati's test wasn't just physical, it was personal. It was an internal battle, one that each human had to fight alone. On the streets of New York, Lieutenant Maria Sykes found herself standing in front of a large crowd of angry protesters. They were chanting, accusing her of failure, of betraying the very people she had fought to protect. The faces were familiar, her comrades from past missions, her family. But their eyes were full of hatred. She stepped forward, ready to speak, but no words came. Instead, the crowd began to shout louder, drowning her in their accusations. She felt small, helpless. "How could you?" a voice rang out. "You abandoned us. You failed us, Maria." But this time she didn't run. The voice, her own guilt, was there, but she stood tall. She took a deep breath, her fists clenched. She knew she couldn't escape the past, but she could control her future. She faced the crowd and, with every ounce of strength, shouted back, "I did my best. I fought for all of you. I will keep fighting for the future. For humanity." With those words, the crowd began to disperse, the voices quieting. Sykes realized that the trial was not about running from the fear, but about standing firm in the face of it. Back in the battlefield of Calloway's mind, the world had shifted once more. This time he stood on the bridge of a ship. His ship, facing the vast, endless expanse of space. The mission was a failure. Earth was in ruins, and Calloway had failed to protect his people. "Captain," a voice from behind him said. He turned, and there stood his crew, each of them looking at him with disappointment. "You failed us," Lieutenant Sykes said. "You let us down." "No," Calloway whispered, his voice shaky but resolute. "I didn't. We fought until the very end. We're still here. We're still standing." The world around him began to fade, and a new light filled the space, warm and brilliant. And in that moment, Calloway realized that the Zorati were wrong. They were testing humanity's fears, yes, but in doing so, they had underestimated one thing: the human spirit. Humanity didn't give up in the face of fear. They faced it head-on. And as long as they had that strength, they would always rise. As the trial ended, the Zorati's voice echoed one last time. You have passed, Captain Calloway. Humanity has proven itself worthy. Calloway stood tall, though his heart was still racing. The Zorati had expected humanity to crumble under the weight of its own fears, but instead, humanity had faced its darkest challenges and overcome them. He turned to the team behind him, his face full of resolve. We did it. And the Zorati learned something today. Humanity is far stronger than they could ever imagine. Humanity had passed the ultimate test. And now, the Zorati had learned the true meaning of humanity. Yeah.